So I begin with three short stories. As a theater person and as a student of history, I enjoy looking at fashion and how it has evolved over time, especially relative to physical activity. So in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, it's a fascinating time in this country of radically changing social roles for gender and general enthusiasm for exercise as a boost for health. I mean, you think we had a kind of an exercise craze in the 80s and the 90s? Let me tell you, the 1800s, they were getting it going. They were inventing bicycles, they were inventing exercise, wacky, crazy machines that were trying to accomplish muscle building and toning for all genders and many ages. And I'm also aware of how difficult the clothing they chose made it. So, over 100 years ago, women went to great lengths to cover the fact they were riding bicycles with split skirts. Ooh. They had these panels that would button down on either side of the front of the leg over the split skirt. So when they were riding the skirt and this was comfortable and modest and everything, they were fine. But then when they got off the bike, they had to button up these panels. So it looked like they were just wearing a skirt, not, pants. Not that they had, legs that could move freely. Oh my. What a fascinating policing of the body. Even when there was social encouragement for movement or exercise. I want to also keep in mind that particular period was that run up those last decades to women getting the vote in this country. We seem to still be struggling with the body and the vote, don't we? So let me turn to 1969 and the riots at the New York bar Stonewall that included transgender Black and people of color, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. How that population, how that uprising got started was a fighting back against the relentless police raids in one of the few places where lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer questioning folks could gather for company, for survival, even while risking arrest and public exposure and public condemnation. A year after those riots was the first Pride March, was the first out and about statement of we are here and we are public and we are not going away. And it kicked off the whole gay rights movement. And it has evolved into celebrations across the nation, including here in Peoria in July. Third story here is more contemporary. There was this family cookout in April 2018 in Oakland, California, a local park. A Black family was grilling outside, and a white woman came over to them and called the police on them. She called the police on this Black family because they were using charcoal in a non-charcoal area. That was worth calling the police for. And confronted this family who was simply trying to enjoy a day at the park. But the confrontation showed how much this was more about a race moment than anything else. And the incident opened up the conversation and how much African Americans were not able to enjoy time in public, not able to enjoy simple daily living without the risk of having the police called on them by white folks. And the community responded. A few weeks after that incident in April, they had what they called a barbecuing while Black event on that same spot. Hundreds of people gathered in solidarity and to simply have a good time. And they had music and vendors and dance concerts and more. We talk about self care and health. We talk about joy and arts and expression and writing and music. And yet, and yet, we have yet our understanding of joy and pleasure and simply feeling good is at best mixed in our predominantly Western culture. The joy of feeling good is deeply entwined with who can be public in their expression of joy and how. White women are still interrupted by white men who try to insert themselves into a ladies' night out. Black women are criticized when they're out at dinner for being too loud and too enthusiastic. Folks who just talk about their families, who are in same gender marriages and might just simply talk about their spouse or talk about their children, um, they are flaunting that lifestyle. We have so limited how and when a person can be fully human. It is part of the legacy of oppression that is part of white supremacy culture that places everyone who is not white, not straight, not male, not able bodied at increasingly lower levels of culture. It is difficult enough to exist. It's difficult enough to be human. And what is also difficult is to thrive and express that irresistible human impulse and the need for happiness, the need to feel good. We want to feel good. For those populations who have been most marginalized, especially as Adrienne Marie Brown talks about it, there is an expectation that if one is living under oppression, then there's not a whole lot of permission for joy in the midst of the depth of the struggle. But, the poet Toy Derrycoat says, joy is an act of resistance. Joy is an act of resistance. Feeling good is an act of liberation. As Adrienne Marie Brown talks in her book, Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good, she cites Audre Lorde, also a Black woman, a Black author, who spoke of pleasure and the erotic as an awakening of the self as much as the body, and Marie Brown asks herself, when did I unlearn pleasure? When did I unlearn pleasure? And she says, it's when I look back and see that there was an ancestral unlearning of a pleasure way back on the Black women of this country have been trained to be in service to others with our bodies rather than be in pleasure with our bodies. That the very body is not one's own. She says, I realize that we're not the only ones, that almost every human on the earth in some way has been disconnected from their natural relationship to the planet, for their natural relationship to themselves, from their natural relationships to each other, and that pleasure is one of the ways we know God. She continues, it's actually a measure of freedom, this experience of pleasure. It's a way to say, I have decolonized myself. I have returned to myself. I have been healing against oppression. And to become integral with self motivated and empowered from within the touch, I become less willing to accept powerlessness, she says, or those other states of being which are not native, such as resignation and despair, depression and self denial. There is such a weight in oppression. Austin Channing Brown talks about this. Black girls and Black women alike have our joy misconstrued as disrespectful, as arrogant, or perpetually inappropriate. Our joy is suspicious. And what right do we have joy when we have so much work to do? We aren't just pursuing racial justice when we are organizing or voting or protesting or speech making or volunteering or working. We are also pursuing justice when we indulge in joy. And I would say that this applies to all people, African American, people of color, indigenous folks, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, and queer plus, to folks experiencing ableism, classism, gender, mental health concerns, mental and emotional disabilities, learning differences. There is joy in every marginalized population, as there should be. But it also applies, this question of joy and liberation applies to us all, and justice, because every one of us, including the ones that have been set up as the apex of the supremacy, white men, have also been constrained in feeling, have also been told how and when to feel pleasure, how and when to treat others and respect their bodies, and so on. We need equity in access, in joy, and in liberation for us all. My liberation is wrapped up with yours, no matter who I am and who you are. Our liberal religious response is very much in this line. We affirm liberty, expression, freedom. We affirm power and agency and choice in spiritual exploration, in theology, in people having a voice in our congregations, and also in the creation of our community. One of the most powerful examples of how we do this for the liberation of us all is in our comprehensive sexuality education programs that we have been known for decades. It was about your sexuality when I was a teenager. It's now our whole lives, and it covers children and youth and adults of all ages. It begins with affirming the body and the spirit at the very youngest ages. It affirms agency and consent and biology and diversity. It follows with, as you get progressively developmentally appropriate, it follows with relational questions and understanding of the self so that we may make choices in line with our values and also simply be curious. We get to wonder and laugh together and discover together and try and mess up and try again. We have ways to learn and explore vocabulary and sexuality across the human life. And we get to, that's one of the ways we witness and are active in this world, but on the daily basis in our congregational lives, we have so many places of joy that helps us get out into the world and do the things we feel called to do. We have the joy of being together, of exploring, of wondering. As I think I said last week, this congregation finds joy in its coffee hour. You coffee hour hard. It's excellent. And this is from someone, my mother put the hour in coffee hour, so I know. You simply want to enjoy being together, and this is a good thing. We call each other into activity, into justice, into working together for everybody's benefit. I think last Saturday at the Hands Off protests, there was a wonderful feeling good on the local response, on the national response, about the success of that moment and the range of people showing up. It was people who have been showing up and protest and rallying and witnessing for decades. Yes, there were so many signs that said, I have been protesting this heck for 40, 50, 60 years. But there were also people for whom those were their first moments of showing up. And it wasn't just like teenagers or preteens coming to their first protest. It was also people saying, my dad is here for the first time ever, and he's in his 70s. There was and is a power in finding ways to feel good. And feeling good itself is a political act. We can act up. Octavia Butler, African American author, science fiction writer, talks about this in every dystopian, post apocalyptic world she writes. People are certainly struggling and trying to find their way. And in every story, there are people who find love. In every story, there are people who dance. In every story, there are people who create music, who find places to wonder and savor and just taste and feel into the world. Because she tells us and reminds us simply by creating those characters about the human need to feel good, to love and play and make music and cook and play games. This is for the entirety of the world, this work of feeling good. Adrienne Maree Brown reminds us that simply doing this internally, not just for the world, although that's certainly, but also making sure we're doing this internally about this experience of pleasure. It helps us decolonize our own minds and checks us when we find our limits. She says our own internal conversation is the front line to shifting the message and habit and saying yes to pleasure, saying yes to celebration, saying yes to joy. It matters that each of us finds ways to feel good, to enjoy this life, and to take heart in someone else's joy as well. And this act of seeking and liberation and joy, it affirms our theology as well, that dignity and worth of every person, how justice comes to us all when each of us is more whole and more healed, how we are deeply interconnected, and how we should be able to have the opportunity to feel wonderful. So we can take that spirit that feeling good is a political act and go forward. We are in this moment of beginning our annual campaign, which the theme is Rise to the Moment. And so we are being asked in this time, in the year to come, well, certainly in this moment, if you're at all attending to the daily news, but also for the year to come, we are being asked to stretch in mind and body and spirit for our own liberation, for our collective liberation. So that song of this joy, passing along in that song, this joy, this love, this peace, it is with me whenever and wherever. It is with me in all places. The world cannot take that power from me. And in that spirit, we pass that along. We nurture that in our congregations and in ourselves as we pass along joy and celebration and nurturing and caring for the world to our children, as we heard in the story. We pass along growth and patience and tending and abundance so that we may pass along a world renewed to this generation, to the next generation, to those we will never meet, a world of joy and love. So let us go forth and rise in this moment and feel great about it. Amen.